I know back in 2012, you won one of the divisions of Miss Olympia, which is incredibly hard to do. Takes a lot of work ethic, consistency, discipline. I would love to know what are some of the skills and habits that you developed during that time that have transferred into other areas of your life?
I like to say that the gym and fitness, it's kind of like a controlled trial for life. And I see this whether you're competing or not. I think that with the competing, there is that urgency of the deadline, and you're gonna be in a bikini in front of a bunch of people, so you better not embarrass yourself, kind of mindset. One of the biggest things that I noticed for me on my experience, I have, you know, a lot of air quotes traumatic experience from my competing days, but there are also a lot of positives, like the resilience that you build. I cannot begin to tell you how many times I ran on the treadmill and there were tears like streaming down my face, but I got it done because I had no option. The discipline, and I think the getting used to failure, becoming comfortable with failing, because especially in fitness, I feel like a lot of people perceive failure as a bad thing, but then whenever you're talking about the fundamental of muscle development, you need a level of failure to see how far you can push, and then you start to be able to like apply that in other areas of life, and that those micro commitments that you constantly make to yourself on a daily basis and you follow through with them, it starts to give you the confidence to also replicate that in other areas of life, such as, I don't know, your career, your schoolwork, your relationships. So there is a lot of transferable life skills that not just competing. I think competing elevates that because you have that deadline, and you're a bit, most people are a bit petrified of walking in a bikini in front of people. But even just by being a gym goer and pushing yourself whenever you're doing that.
Do you remember any moment or two specifically during that time when you were training for Miss Olympia where it was super tough, you wanted to quit?
Oh my God, yes. So a little fun fact here. A lot of people think that competing pays all your bills, and and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm like swimming in money. But in reality, my bread and butter at the time was bartending. So I was bartending, a few days before I won the biggest bodybuilding competition in the world.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because I had to pay my bills. Competing itself doesn't pay your bills. So, I had to work shifts, and then at the time I was working three jobs. I was bartending, I was doing some personal training, and I worked for a supplement company. So I had to really juggle my sleep schedule with that shift work, getting home at, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then having to be up at 8 or 9 to do cardio, lift, then go train people, then, come home, take a power nap of 15 minutes, get ready and go back to bartending. So there is a lot of juggling that I had to do. And I think that a lot of times I was like, why am I doing this? I actually have a funny story. One time I had this I don't know if you have competed or anybody who's listening, this dried ass chicken. Oh my goodness, it was so dry. I still have a little bit of PTSD from eating chicken because I remember the dry chicken I used to eat. So I'm in my car and I'm eating the chicken. I start choking on the chicken and I start crying because I'm like, why am I doing this to myself as I'm choking on the chicken? But I didn't realize somebody saw it. So I got home and then I got a message on Facebook from somebody that saw me sitting outside the gym crying in my car. They're like, hey, I saw you crying. Are you okay?
Why were you crying?
You just become so emotional. You're hungry. You start to question your life choices. You're like, why am I doing this to myself? So that's actually quite a funny story.
What would you tell yourself during these emotional moments where you're likely sleep deprived, you're super stressed, you're probably nutrient depleted, like you don't have as much food in you as you normally would? Like, what would you tell yourself to get through?
Can I, this is a very good question. Can I take a couple of steps back to actually elaborate why I got there? Because I think it's going to give a lot of context. So I'm originally from Brazil, as you can probably tell by the accent. And, whenever I was about 20 years old, I was in law school in Brazil. Law school in Brazil is a bachelor's. Halfway through, I got into law school when I was about 17. And I started doing an internship in the courthouse. And I just realized how corrupt it was. And I was like, there is no way that I'm going to be a part of this system. And that's kind of when I started to plot my escape from Brazil's. And this, I was about 20 years old. I sold my car and paid some like stuff that I had to pay, bought my plane ticket. And then whenever I got to the US, I had $350 to my name. 20 years old, no job. I lived in a house that it was absolutely covered in cockroaches. When I say covered in cockroaches, people are like, oh, no one here. I'm like, no, no, no. I used to come in my bedroom at night and turn the lights on, and the bed would go from black to white. It was like cockroaches running from the. I didn't even know cockroaches would get on a bed, but they do. So, and I was able to get myself out of that situation with a lot of work and resilience. And so I already had that muscle already a little bit exercised. And I think that most people who are listening, if they're here, they have overcome some kind of adversity. Otherwise, they wouldn't be listening to Adversity Advantage podcast. So, so whenever I started, then I started bartending. And whenever I started bartending, I realized that I got very caught up on the lifestyle, going out and drinking. And I almost reached that season in my life where the fork, I like to call the fork. If I keep on going this way, it's not going to be good. So I either do something to change or I'm going to find myself in a place of no return. And I needed a purpose. I needed something to give me, to make me work towards something bigger, like that. It felt impossible. So what I would tell myself whenever I was in situations, like there was no plan B, like it was literally a burn the boat. I had no, there was nothing else. So it was either that, or going back to the life that I was trying to avoid. So, that for me was my why to keep on pushing forward, because there was nothing else on the other side.
Right. There was no other choice other than to keep moving forward because you didn't want to go back to where you were, right?
Yeah, like, and I kept on bartending, but for me it was more the mindset around working towards something. If like it's like if I fail at this, I'm gonna have to go back to that fork on the road and take the path that it's not going to be good for me long term.
So what advice do you have for people that maybe don't have as incredible of a story as you, but they struggle a lot with self-doubt and they don't have that back against the wall mentality where they're like, you know what, I can't go back any further. They don't have that like you do. Like, what do you tell some of the people that you work with who struggle with self-doubt?
What is it costing you to do nothing? Because everything has a cost. I would consider myself somebody who is very logical with my thought process, with my rationale. Everything has a cost. So you can pay the price of staying, like you can stay where you are. It's great, it's comfortable, it's cushion. Or you can pay the price of discomfort, but then you're going to find yourself on the other side of something that is bigger than you could have ever imagined. But it's not about what you do or where you're going. It's about who you become in the process of becoming. So if I think a lot of people have very laser focus on the outcome, and they forget about the process and the steps that they take, and the development the self development that it requires for them to get from A to B. Like, I think that, the lottery is a very good example. People win a ton of money, but then they're not able to keep it because they have not developed the skills to keep that. So I think that my advice would be to, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Is what you're doing right now serving that greater purpose? If the answer is no, something has to change.
Yeah, something that comes to mind as you were sharing your story and talking about like the emotional cost of competing at the level that you were competing is, I think a lot of people, they see somebody like yourself or they look at people who are, winning these titles today and those people inspire them to get to the gym and want to look a certain way, want to build muscle, want to get lean, jacked, whatever, but they don't understand that there's a big difference between amateur bodybuilding and professional bodybuilding. Talk about the big difference that exists as far as the time, energy, effort, etc.
If we're being honest, I think it's all like that's my personal opinion. If a friend of mine comes to me right now and asks about competing, you know, for me at the time, it was the avenue that I found to challenge myself to overcome something. But the problem that I have, and that is just this, not just with the professional bodybuilding or amateur bodybuilding, is with the industry as a whole, is that it's being sold as this, you know, you are the poster child of health. And I can tell with 100% certainty that there is absolutely nothing that I was doing at the time that is remotely healthy. Like after I won the Olympia, I had a bucket near my bed because I ate myself sick. So I had a sick bucket near my bed. So, and here's, I, I want to make it very clear because a lot of times I get judged. Like, oh, but now you're like, you know, turning your back on these sports that build you. I'm very grateful for bodybuilding. However, I think that the way it is being sold to the masses, there is a big discrepancy between what is and what is being sold. My request is for people that are getting themselves into this and for people at the top who are selling it to people to help them understand that this there is nothing really healthy about the sport of bodybuilding. Is it a very good challenge that you can sign up for? 100%. But selling it as healthy in it, there's nothing healthy. And I think that that's kind of my beef with it, is that maybe I would have made the same choice at the time. I was, you know, in my early 20s. Maybe I would have made the same choice. But I think that being given the options, hey, listen, you know, competing is hard. Competing, it is not as healthy as people are perceiving it to be. It's going to be a lot of like personality building, which is great. But from a health perspective, it ain't it. Chances are 100% certainty that I would have gone with the same decision that I made to go ahead and compete, but I would have gone into it knowing it.
So what do you say to people that like are listening to you say that there's nothing healthy about competing in bodybuilding, and they might argue, well, isn't like eating healthy and paying attention to your level of body fat, getting to the gym, like aren't those things like healthy? Like what in that world to you became so unhealthy?
All of it. So, because even whenever you're talking about isn't eating healthily, um, you know, they go, yeah, but an obsession with it also is an eating disorder called orthorexia. It's about the extremes. Do we have to go to that extreme to, you know, there were days that I was doing 4 hours of cardio a day. That's not normal. Like having to, you know, not taking photos whenever I wasn't in contest prep, and because I was embarrassed of how I look just months before winning the biggest bodybuilding competition in the world. That's not normal. Turning away friends' invitations to, you know, do something together. You know, and I'm not talking about partying like a rock star because I bartended, I was way over it, but just connecting with my friends, but not knowing how to behave around food and having to turn it away because I thought I was fat because I had gained 10 pounds. That is not healthy. So I think that we also have to define the idea of healthy, because there is a big skewed perception of what that is.
What was the transformation process to like having a healthy relationship with food, with fitness, with the way that you looked?
Great question, because that's literally what I do now. Because I feel like, regardless if you have competed or not, I think that competing is a, no pun intended, but it's kind of like yo-yo diet on steroids, because they just give fancy names to it. You have the on season and off season. If you look at any kind of like fad diet out there, it is basically the same cycle, just with somebody that is might not necessarily be getting ready for a competition, but maybe they're getting ready for a wedding, maybe they're getting ready for a vacation, maybe they're getting ready for an event, whatever that is. The cycle is very similar. Maybe the peaks and valleys are not as extreme, but the cycle is nearly identical. So, the process doesn't happen overnight. And I think that that is one thing that we need to really address for someone who is coming off years of extreme eating behaviors, or like the peaks and valleys being, always looking for the next trend. Oh, I want to listen to my body. I'm going to go into doing something that I'm going to listen to my body. It requires time. It is a process, because if you're going to listen to your body after you've been up and down, your body doesn't even know what it feels. So, understanding that there is still going to need some level of structure, for me was the first thing. Understanding that just addressing my training and my nutrition, the training and the nutrition were, we're addressing the symptoms, not addressing the root cause. And what I mean by that is that the root cause lives rent free in between your two ears. That's your mindset, that extreme mentality, the all or nothing mentality, the perfectionist mentality, the self sabotage. If you're not addressing that, you're going to keep on being stuck on a cycle, because your body's only going to go as far as your mind goes with it. Otherwise, it's going to keep on coming back, because the mind is the set point for the body. So, in order for me to be able to change that, I needed to start to look at things from a different perspective. For example, I was able to get ready, competition ready, in like 14 weeks, 16 weeks, because it was like fast and furious. So I had to manage my expectations. If I wanted to do something that was a bit more long term, that the time frame maybe wouldn't be as quick. But the quick solution didn't serve me long term. So these were like mostly the tweaks that I had to make into my thought process. And also I had very big motivators, which were having my kids. I didn't want my daughter to watch me in that cycle, because it wasn't healthy. It wasn't something like, if my daughter came to me and that's a question that I ask with any woman that I speak to. How would that make you feel for your child to feel exactly how you feel right now? Because if the answer is anything less than I would feel amazing for her to feel exactly how I feel, something has to change. And at the time, I didn't feel amazing. So I knew that I was the example that I had to set for her.
So what was the process like for you as far as like changing expectations for your health, and then also like, changing your relationship with instant gratification and validation? Like you went from, competing at the highest level, having people pat you on the back for the way that you looked, to now you're like, you know what? Like I realize this is essentially like ruining your life, and taking you to a dark place. Like what were some of the steps that you took, like in like real life situations, to not be so attached to instant gratification?
I think that the first thing was, which it's the hardest part. I think this is the like 50% of the battle, is realizing that whatever it is that you're doing doesn't serve you. I think that this is the hardest part for most people. I would speak with people sometimes, and then they'll describe years of yo-yo dieting. And I'm like, is what you're doing right now working? They're like, oh yeah, it is. That's denial. Stop being crazy. That's delusion. So my come to Jesus moment was, my husband was a professional rugby player in Ireland. He played, at the highest level. He represented his country. He like played with what you'd call all-star teams and things like that. And I started to, and again, most of the people that I surrounded myself with were in the bodybuilding space. So a lot of the behaviors that I had were quote unquote normal, according to the environment in which I was in. And then I was like, oh, that's what professional athletes do. But then I started dating my husband, and I started to see that his career, like his profession as a professional rugby player, stopped the moment that he left the field. I'm not saying that he would, go off the rails and eat for a family of 27 and not give a shit about his nutrition, but he was, he could go to a restaurant without obsessing about it. He could go on a vacation and not be, stressing out about eating X, Y, and Z. And that for me was the beginning of the end, because I was like, I don't live like that. And this man gets paid even if he doesn't play or if he doesn't win. I don't get paid if I don't win. So that was kind of the beginning of my wheels turning. And then the other thing that I had to realize is that I couldn't cure the problem with the thing that caused the problem. And here's what I mean by that. Oftentimes you have people that are like, oh, I'm just going to go back to competing and I'm going to get in shape and then I'm going to walk away and I'm going to be able to maintain. That's not how it works. You're going to back to the thing that caused the problem to solve the problem. It just doesn't make sense. So I had to make the executive decision of stepping away from competing so I could, work on myself, my relationship. And in the beginning, it could mean, not having foods that I knew that I would binge readily available at home. I would just buy the amount which I knew that I could, that I could comfortably eat without completely wreaking havoc on my nutrition. And then that was that. So it was a lot of like exposure, slowly exposing myself to different things and getting professional help. Getting professional help for all angles. People be out there trying to fix their own problem when they don't even know they have a problem. And I'm like, stop it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot on the show about friendships and your inner circle, and one of the things that I'll say is like, your environment does create this sense of normalcy, right? Where you think everything is normal based on the people around you.
100%.
And it's not until you step outside of that environment that you realize, like, oh my gosh, like that was not normal. Can't believe I did some of that stuff. But I think you also have to have this level of compassion for people, because it can be really tough to escape some of these environments that they're used to being in for years, decades, etc.
I agree, but I 100% I agree with compassion. But and is environment important? Yes, but there are a lot of circumstances in which you might not have full control of your environment. Like for example, if we're talking about somebody who has a lot of, like my mom is incredibly unhealthy. My mom is like your poster child of all the yo-yo diets that has probably ever been invented in the face of. I was doing the cabbage soup diet with her when I was, I don't know, 12.
Wow.
So, I grew up in a Latino household where the, diet culture and comments about your body is very prevalent and it flows easily. Like, ain't nobody batting an eyelid to say that you look fat. So that was the environment in which I was in, but I still have agency over what I decide to do. And I think that that's what is being lost a lot in the process. Is I do understand that there needs to be compassion, but you have agency to put yourself in environments that are going to support your ultimate goal. And that is going to come at at a cost. Maybe you don't have as much time to spend with the people that are your family, you love them, but they don't align with your ultimate goal. Maybe you still dedicate some time to them, but you have to make choices. And, we can control the only thing that we have full control is ourselves and how we respond to the circumstances. You've had shitty days. I've had, shitty circumstances as well, circumstances that didn't serve me. But it was about what I decided to do, what you decided to do with the situation. But a lot of times people decide to let their environment and their circumstances define them and fall into that victim mentality, which is going to keep you stuck.
Given that you don't put so much emphasis anymore on like vanity and the way that you look as far as your health, like how do you set goals for yourself and help your client set goals so that they can, see results and progress without paying so much attention to the way they look?
So I just because somebody doesn't bodybuild, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't care about how they look. There might not be a level of obsession with the way they look, but I still care. I want to look good for myself, because if I look good, I feel good, and if I feel good, I'm going to be able to show up in a much better way that is going to make a much bigger impact due to what I do for work. And I'm going to be a better example for my kids. I think that it is realizing that, yes, it is perfectly okay to have. I joke all the time whenever people start talking to me and they're like, "Oh, I don't want to be vain." I'm like, "Listen, you're speaking to somebody who has won the biggest vanity contest on the planet. You do not need to apologize for being vain. You are in the right place." But I think it is understanding that there is plenty of data that supports that people that look good, they act more confidently, they make more money, they get better promotions, and they show up better, because it is important to understand that it isn't just about the look, it is about the consequences that not feeling like you look your best has in other areas of life. For example, you will likely impact your intimacy with your partner. You likely impact how you show up for work and your ability to put yourself out there and ask for a raise. It is going to impact, your social life, wanting to go out or making, excuses to not go out because you don't want to see people because your clothes don't fit. So I think is understanding that the looks is important. I have no problem with vanity. Queen of vanity over here. No problem with that. But if we're not speaking about the layers of not feeling that you look your best, has, like, I've spoken with women that didn't go to their kids' sports events because they didn't want to be seen by people, by other parents. They would stay in the car. That is not normal. So if we're not addressing the consequences of that, it's going to be very difficult to create a long-term solution, because that is the deeper why.
This episode is brought to you by Live On Labs. If you are someone who is constantly stressed, feeling depleted, and exhausted, I have some exciting news. My friends at Live On Labs have an incredible deal I can offer you. When you buy any product at full price, you get a free carton of their highly popular B complex product, which I take every day. Taking a B complex supplement can also help support things like a healthy metabolism, increased energy, blood sugar balance, and learning. Vitamin B supplements can help replenish nutrients depleted from stress. Live On Labs puts years of research into each product, which is why I stand behind them. Using liposome encapsulation technology, these products promote elite absorption so the supplements get into your cells and give you the best benefits that you're looking for. Right now, you can get a free carton of Lipospheric B Complex Plus, which is a $56 value, with any full price purchase from liveonlabs.com. This supplement has the B vitamins and minerals that you need to help turn food into sustained natural energy throughout the day. Just add B Complex Plus and any other full price supplement to your cart and enter code BOPES24 at checkout to get this amazing deal. Now back to the show. So when you're working with somebody, what's the conversation like with them so that you can maybe inspire them to not get so attached and obsessed with the way that they look, but also care enough that they're going to stay on track with their goals?
I think that the first thing is to truly understand how it is impacting their lives in a very practical manner. Like, and it's funny because there's not a lot of people talking about the impact on intimacy with their significant other. And this is like 9 out of 10 women that I speak to. This is like reality that I don't understand why there are more conversations about that. I don't know on the men's side, but in the women's side, it is well and alive. So, anchoring on the bigger picture, it isn't about just losing the 5 pounds, is what the 5 pounds represent. And most importantly, understanding the impact on the mental load, because the more you're doing these quick fixes, there is that mental load that it comes with it of just waiting for things to fall apart again. Because nobody got to a place where they gained, I don't know, 30 pounds, 40 pounds overnight. It's probably been, I did a diet and then it was extreme and then I lost the weight and then I gained, that weight and then 3 pounds more. And then the next diet, they lose the 10 plus the three. But then whenever they gain it back, it's the 10 plus the three plus the five. It's a progression. And then they almost start to convince themselves that they suck. It's kind of like, see, every time that I do it, I suck. But they are still deploying these strategies from when they were in college now, and it doesn't serve the person that they are now. So I think it is about helping them understand that it is not a character flaw, but it is maybe a strategy flaw. So whenever we start to understand that, I think that they can start to see the bigger picture.
One of the struggles I think a lot of people have on their health journey is when, like you said, they end up gaining some weight back, or they end up missing a week at the gym. They end up binging one weekend. They beat themselves up, and they're like, you know what? Like I'm just off, and I'm going to go off the rails, and they end up having this horrible relationship with themselves, a lot of negative self talk. They view like health and fitness in a really negative way. Like how do you help people kind of escape that trap when they fall into it?
Do you remember in the beginning, whenever I said that whenever you're talking about the training and the exercise, you're addressing the symptom, not the root cause? That's that right there. If we don't start to talk about that perfectionist mentality, if we do not start to talk about the seasonality of life, if we don't start to talk about the all or nothing mentality, there is only so much that you're going to be able to accomplish, because everybody is going into the fitness with like, okay, and I'm going to train 7 days a week for 2 hours every day, and I'm going to eat lettuce and ice cubes, and I'm never ever going to have sugar ever again, because if I do, I suck. But then whenever you look at their lives, they're already working, I don't know, like 50, 60 hours a week. They have children, they have a social life, they have to travel for work. They There is a disconnect from reality, and then they're setting themselves up for failure from the get-go. So we need to take a few steps back and, okay, what is something that you can do given the life that you have right now? It's not going to be perfect, so accept that it's not going to be perfect. So what if we, instead of training 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week for 2 hours, we committed for 3 times a week for 20 minutes, instead of, completely, let's say that I'm talking to somebody that has Chick-fil-A 5 days a week, just for example. I come to,
Are you hating on Chick-fil-A?
not at all,
I
not
love
at
I
all.
almost went there on my way home from the gym today.
I love, so let's say that we have somebody that likes to eat Chick-fil-A 5 times a week. If I come to that person, I was like, listen, Chick-fil-A never again. That's all they know. That person is going to go into a panic. It's going to be like, yeah, but then they're relying on motivation. But then that steam is going to run out really quickly. So what, instead of like, hey, instead of 5 times a week, how about we, go down to 3 times a week, and those 2 extra meals you have from a homemade meal, which is likely to reduce the net caloric intake by the end of the week. And taking those incremental steps that helps people adjust to something that is more aligned to the season of life that they're in.
That's a really good point. Like talking about the seasons of life. I mean, I remember early in my career as a trainer being super obsessed with fitness, like most trainers are. And then I expected my clients to be as obsessed with fitness as I was. And I would be training like these, busy parents or busy business executives, who had kids and stuff, and they're running around doing a bunch of things. And I'm like, why can't you work out? Yeah, 5 days a week. Why don't you just suck it up and just, why don't you just do it for yourself? Put yourself first. And then like as I've gotten older, and I think a lot of trainers make this transition, the great trainers from good to great, if they understand how can they insert fitness into these people's existing lives with where they're at, right? And it was a big like awakening for me when I realized like, oh, like me talking to my clients like this and expecting them to have the same passion for fitness is hurting their progress. And And I think that that's a really important like point that you bring up, is that, sometimes people aren't going to be as obsessed with fitness, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think that that is where. Just quick question: do you feel sometimes, because I was the same, like when I was in my 20, like I joke that my only responsibility was to have clean clothes for work and show up for work. The end. Like that's it. And now, like I have two small kids. My kids are 14 months apart. And we moved to Texas, where from Ireland to Texas we have zero family help, so our lives is very different. So now whenever I think about some of the advice and the conversations that I had with clients when I was in my 20s, I almost want to call every single one of them and be like, I am so sorry, I apologize, I didn't know better. Because it is like it is different.
It's way different. I think what changed it for me was just being around different people from all walks of life and just seeing what their lifestyles were like. And then just hearing, the more I heard about the amount of practices and stuff they had to run their kids to and the
It's
amount of hours they
ridiculous.
worked, I was like, wow, like now I can understand why you can't commit to coming to the gym, more than like twice a week. And I had to like really understand, like, okay, like you can still get some really great results with coming to the gym 2 to 3 days a week. You don't have to work out 5, 6 days a week like I was. But yeah, I mean, it really does take like understanding that. I mean, I guess like, going back to you with your clients, um, you talked about strategies that haven't worked for people. You talked about, when people become too obsessive, it can obviously lead them down a really dark place. Like, what are some of the like strategies or rules that you implement with your clients, generally speaking, to make sure that they're seeing their health results through?
I think that the first thing is managing expectations, especially if I'm talking to somebody who's come from, a cycle of, I'm going to do this and I'm going to lose 30 pounds in 3 months. This is not going to be 30 pounds in 3 months kind of deal. Like that's the first thing. I have to set their expectation to something that it is more aligned with the ultimate goal. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, if your goal is to lose 30 pounds, I can get you to lose 30 pounds in a month if you want to. But then we're going to be having this exact same conversation 6 months from now. But then you're not going to need to lose 30 pounds. You're going to have to lose 40. So I think that it is setting the expectation, and meeting people where they're at. And that's something very big in the fitness space, kind of exactly how you're talking about, younger trainers, no shade at all, because I have been there trying to impose a certain lifestyle on people that they don't want to step on the stage. I have a funny story actually. I remember I did a lot of speaking engagements. I've spoken in over 30 countries to help fitness professionals, in with helping their clients with training, all of that. And one of these speaking engagements that I was, this trainer comes to me and he goes, so I have this client and I'm not entirely sure if I should like carb cycle her and I'm going to do X, Y. And then he starts saying all these things. Like by the third carb cycle that he was doing, I had already got lost in the numbers. And then I'm like, okay. I'm like, what does she do? Oh yeah, she works in corporate. She's like in HR. And I'm like, right. What else? Oh, and she travels a lot for work. And I'm like, okay. And how much is she eating right now? And then he goes, I don't know. She's like, probably, she's not really sticking to the plan. She's eating, I don't know, like 3,000 calories a day. And I'm like, that is the first thing. It doesn't matter if you carb cycle. You're going to be slapping lipstick in a pig. It's still a freaking pig. Like carb cycling, a caloric surplus, it's not going to solve the problem. So I think that there is an overcomplication of fitness, and people are constantly focusing on the thing that optimizes instead of focusing on the foundational thing that is going to drive 95 to 97% of the results. So taking the way that we work is taking, like, removing all the BS, all the noise. Where is the bare minimum that we can do right now that is going to allow these women to stay compliant without feeling like this is another full-time job for them? And instead of obsessing over every single little data and like glucose monitor and this, that, and the other, remove that. there is just going to be more noise in a mind that is already overwhelmed by everything else going around her. So that is my first thing, setting expectations and keeping things as like dumb it down as simple as possible. Not because these women are dumb, but because they're already so overwhelmed by everything that social media is telling them that they should do without the context of their lives.
Right. And so like maybe getting a little bit more specific. Obviously, calories in, calories out is, the number one golden rule for weight loss, right? What other like rules would you say that you have in place regarding maybe like protein, strength training, carbs, fiber, etc., for the women that you work with to help them, um, stay as fit, lean, etc., as possible?
We have a rule that I will never tell anybody that I coach that they are not, quote unquote, allowed to eat something. They're not allowed to do something. I am not a bunch of grown women's babysitter. I much rather teach them
Do you let them eat seed oils? That's all I want to know.
what
Do you let them eat seed oils?
they can eat whatever they want. And then it just reminds me of Joey with Joey Munoz, for everybody listening, with his yellow glasses. Oh my God, that cracks me up so much. But it's not about, like, I much rather teach them and explain to them what something is and allow them to make the decision that aligns with their goals, because I think that as fitness professionals, we're removing people's powers to make decisions whenever we start to tell them what they are or aren't allowed of doing. So to answer your question in a more objective manner, that is the way that we like to work with most of our clients, is understanding where they're at. So we don't have any particular hard rules in the sense of you have to exercise X amount of days, because we were working, for example, with a lady. She is a pediatrician, and like she runs her own practice. And whenever I first spoke with her, she's like, "Oh, I can commit to is 15 minutes a day, twice a week." And I'm like, "Cool, let's do that." And she's like, "Can I do that?" And I'm like, "Sure." But then I had her buy in. And then 3 weeks later, she emails us and she's like, "You know what? I think I can actually do 3 times a week for 20 minutes." And then you build from there. So from a hard rule, we don't necessarily have hard rules. I think that if we're looking at something, more practical, you would be to to be very mindful whenever it comes to the nutrition about protein intake. And again, that comes that personalization aspect. In a perfect world, we're looking at anywhere between zero point 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. That's the, ideal case scenario. However, let's say that I start working with somebody and I look at their food diary and they're eating almost no protein. It is going to be too much of a big jump for me to put them at zero point 0.7 right out of the gate. So I'm going to have to build on that. So that's why I don't particularly like any hard rules, because it really is going to depend on the starting point of each individual that we work with.
And so like outside of that, what are some other things that you help, some other guardrails that you put in place to help people be more flexible with the way they eat?
We incorporate, like, one of the questions that we ask. So, and just for context, my team, whenever I was coached for competition, I did not have a very good experience. And for a long time, I was petrified of coaching people because of my personal experience. In fact, I have never in my life coached a competitor, ever. You couldn't pay me enough, ever.
Why?
Because the line of healthy and unhealthy that I constantly had to cross, I didn't want to do that to somebody else. Doing that to somebody else wouldn't allow me to put my pillow at night and go to sleep knowing that I'm truly changing somebody's lives.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could be potentially changing somebody's like body chemistry forever, right?
But I just didn't know if that was the best avenue. So I just made that hard rule for myself, because I joke, I saying I'm very outspoken. Some people say, "Oh, Natalia she's an honest." You know what I mean? Like I am somebody I truly appreciate. Having a reputation where people know that I take what I do seriously. So for this reason, now the walk around to say this, like whenever I start my coaching program, I made sure that I had a registered dietitian on my team, because just because something worked for me, it doesn't necessarily means it's going to work for everybody else. Whenever we're dealing with women who have health conditions, who have allergies, I do not want to put anybody's life at risk. And we're truly dealing with people's lives in longevity and being able to be here to watch their kids grow up. It is a big responsibility. And we also have an in-house counselor, licensed counselor, because a lot of the challenges that I see women having is not just with the food and and exercise, but it's also kind of going back what lives in between their two ears. And a lot of the disordered eating patterns that I was seeing, the disordered eating behaviors, eating disorders, were way outside my scope. So the guardrails is to help people understand that this is a holistic change, and it's not just oh, how many workouts do I have to do a week? It depends. And it's like the question that I like, the answer that I hate the most. It depends, but it ultimately is.
So if we get into like specific weight workout stuff, I mean, I would just love to hear your thoughts. Like generally speaking, if you have a woman who's coming to you who wants to build muscle, like what are some of the things you tell them as far as like what to implement into their workout routine if they're like, hey, I want to come to you, I have the time to put in 2 to 3 days a week, like what does their workout program look like?
Depends where what they have. It depends what they have accessibility to, because again, idea people don't live in a vacuum. Perfect scenario would love for them to go to the gym and be able to lift as heavy as possible and all of that. But if I'm talking about somebody who does not have the time to go to a gym, we're going to have to work with what they have at home. Then we're going to be working with resistance bands and dumbbells and kettlebells if they can have bars. So but one thing that I'm very emphatically not for is, actually there are two things. One is boot camps. I think they're a waste of fucking time. Excuse my French. Oh, they kill me, and it absolutely destroys my soul. I think that they can be a very good tool for community building, but they style like you. That is not true strength training. And they prey on the women that need the muscle development the most, which is that perimenopausal, menopausal, middle-aged kind of women, which is me. Like I'm 41, like that's me. And then I walk in front of like the boot camp classes and like group classes in the gym, and I literally want to bang my head against the wall. um so I think that that would be the first thing. And also, if we're trying to maximize time, one thing that I see a lot of people wasting their times on, and again, take whenever I say wasting time with a grain of salt, because I don't think that movement is ever a waste of time. But if you're trying to be efficient with what you're doing, is whenever I see people going to the gym that they only have like 2, 3 days to go and they spend a whole day doing arms. I'm like, why? What are you doing? So I normally try to incorporate a lot of compound movements that are, deploying bigger muscle groups. That way we can, maximize the efficiency of the workout and caloric output if some level of fat loss is needed. And you are going to be engaging more muscle groups instead of being very hyper focused on, more isolated movements and smaller muscle groups.
How do you help people um, track their progress, and like what do you think is the best way for people to measure whether or not a workout program is working?
Oh, I love this question because I have a little bit of a different opinion from a lot of people in the fitness space. Because I think I let me phrase this in a way that makes sense. A lot of times when I speak with a woman, They will say, the conversation starts a bit like this. Because I gained about 20 pounds and then my clothes don't fit and blah, 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 blah. And then I listen. And then a few moments later, I ask them and I'm like, okay, so what are your goals? And then they say, well, I don't really care about the scale. That's a lie, because you started a conversation telling me that you gained 20 pounds. So, I think that this idea that for some reason the scale does not matter at all is a lie. Because I'll be speaking with somebody who has, I don't know, who's like 40% body fat. Oh, I don't care about the scale. No, we need to care a bit about the scale, because nobody gets to 40% body fat by, ignoring the scale. Is the scale perfect? No. Is the scale an absolute truth? No. The scale is a tool. I think that whenever we have the clarity, as in that coachee relationship, on what the outcome is, we're able to set expectations and deliver that in a proper way. Because what happens whenever people, let's say in the case of the person who said that they want to, like, oh, I gained 20 pounds, but I don't care about the scale. We start working together and then they don't lose, I don't know, a pound or 2 pounds per week. And then they start panicking. And then in my head, I'm like, why is she panicking? Like, she told me she didn't care about the scale, but she does. So we need that honesty. But now, are we talking about, and again, this is another thing that I step away from most people in the fitness industry, the whole idea of weighing themselves every single day. I hate it. And the reason for that is because whenever you're talking with, here, perfect scenario, assuming that everybody's a robot, is weighing yourself a good solution to have that medium metric throughout the week? 100%. It is. It is perfect. But we're not talking about robots. We're talking about people who have feelings. We're talking about people who, who get anxious if they see the weight going is slightly up. We're talking about people that let a lot of times their lives be dictated, and their happiness or sadness be dictated by what the scale says. So I don't particularly like to have any of our members weighing themselves every single day, because I believe that it can have a very negative mental impact, that it is going to hinder progress. So whenever it comes to tracking progress, I like to look at photos, because I've been doing this for 16 years and I trust my eyeballs. Like, if you're making progress, I'm going to be able to see it. And then we add the scale, because then it's going to give me a ballpark of volume that is being lost. So, and then we can do measurements. I like to keep things simple. Ideal perfect scenario, I would like, measurements and this, that, and the other, but we're talking about busy people. And I'm not going to make everybody measure themselves with a measuring tape every single week, because then again, it is not something that they can do consistently. Taking photos and weighing themselves is something that is very easily done.
As we're bringing this conversation to a close, you've talked about like the confusion that may exist on social media. We've talked about it here and then offline. Who are some of your like favorite accounts that you point people to, other than yourself, to get like the no BS health and fitness information from?
Lane Norton would be one. I really like Lane's stuff. I learned a lot from Lane, and a lot of the things that I didn't stand against, or I was, vehemently against, I watched Lane's content and I was like, huh, I can see it, and changed my mind in a lot of things. Lane, Joey is another one. I really like Joey's stuff. I joke whenever I was on his podcast. I was like, you're one of the very few sane accounts in the fitness space. And Jordan Sayat would be yeah, like Jordan. I love how he, especially now that he has kids, a lot of the things that he talks about are very aligned with what I experienced as well. And they're practical, sane, simple strategies that I think that the fitness industry needs more of, than a shirtless idiot running around the grocery store screaming at water bottles because they have microplastic. Like, when we're struggling to get people to drink water. So yeah, those would be my three accounts.
Well, Natalia, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for sharing your incredible story, and for sharing all your wisdom and insights you've learned along the way. I think my audience is going to really enjoy this one.
Thank you so much for having me. And if anybody wants to find me, I am on Instagram, Nathalia Melo Fit. The Natalia, my mom tried to get fancy, is Nathalia. Melo, Melo Fit, FIT, probably in the show notes. And I have a podcast as well, which Doug, I would love to have you. Not to put you on the spot or anything. It's called Unfiltered Fit Life Podcast. And you can find me there. A lot of my, and if you have any questions, I'm the one on my Instagram. So send me a message and ask me anything. I'm an open book.
Awesome. Well, I would love to come on your podcast. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome.